do we make a difference? Hello? Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. We're ready to start our program. How do we make a difference? How do we meet the many challenges of our time, especially those challenges marred in racial and economic injustices? We join and build communities of people like yourselves who are eager, willing, and committed to staying the course and often directing an uncharted course for change. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Vangela M. Wade, Chair of the Mississippi Center for Justice's Board of Directors. Welcome to our 16th annual Mississippi on the Potomac reception. Tonight, we gather once more to renew our ties of friendship and support with allies here in Washington, D.C., as we recommit ourselves to bringing racial justice and equal opportunity to the great state of Mississippi. We are delighted to pay tribute this evening to a very powerful voice for equal justice under law and a preeminent attorney, professor, and scholar, Walter Dellinger. As we continue to face turbulent times in our nation, and yes, in our state of Mississippi, we know the work of the Mississippi Center for Justice is more important than ever. Over the past year, we have seen major wins through our George Riley Impact Litigation Initiative, which you will hear more about later in the program, along with an update on our work in health and immigration. We continue to tackle discrimination and injustice and a broad range of other issues, including education, food security, access to credit, and housing. I invite you to learn more about our clients and our work from our annual report that you will find on our website. In the Mississippi for Justice 16th year, yes, we've 16 years, it seems like yesterday, but 16 years, we can say that we have accomplished a lot, but our clients' needs badly outstrip and surpass our resources. Your support tonight makes it possible for us to continue our fight, and we thank you. Let me conclude by expressing on behalf of the Center's board, staff, and our clients, the many clients that we serve, our sincere gratitude to each and every one of you. The work of the Mississippi Center for Justice would not be possible without your encouragement and your loyal support. Now it is my pleasure, my great pleasure, to introduce to you the President and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Justice, Riley Morris. Riley.
Good evening and welcome, everybody. We're delighted to have you here once more for our 2019 Mississippi on the Potomac reception. In a moment, we'll share with you some of our work to promote racial and economic justice in our state, and then pay tribute to the extraordinary Walter Dellinger and to a special MCJ friend, the late Michael Trister. We'll begin by expressing thanks to our event host committee, which is led by Robert Rabin, Joyce Ladner, and Brad Buttman, and to the other host committee members. To our underwriters, O'Melveny and Myers, Bergman, Draper, Osland, Barbara and David Lippman, Lois and James Rudolph, Mary Jean Morse Likes, and Charles Reynolds. They helped us pinnacle, and we're grateful to them all. Also to our champions of justice, Bernard Nussbaum, Wilmer Hale, Sidley Austin, Williams and Connolly, Mayor Brown, Latham and Watkins, Munger Tolles Olson, Dr. Edward Bergmark, and Ellen Weiss. So we're keeping some pretty fancy company here. We're delighted to be a vehicle for paying tribute to these great folks. We also want to thank each and every one of you who are here tonight, because your generous and loyal support has made this our most financially successful Potomac reception in our history, as we have raised just shy of $310,000. So thanks to you all. Each dollar we raise in general support makes it more possible for us to make a more just Mississippi through the work of our legal teams in partnership with pro bono lawyers and advocates here in Washington and across the country. Thank you from all of us and from all of the clients that we serve. When you invest in MCJ, the benefits are far-reaching and long-lasting. For example, your past support of MCJ after Hurricane Katrina has meant that 13 years later, in partnership with Oxfam America, we could pass on tools for success to Puerto Rico's advocates after Hurricane Maria, and some of them are here tonight. We'd like to offer special thanks to Ellen Weiss, a longtime supporter of our organization, because we approached her recently about a mounting injustice in the immigrant and refugee community in Mississippi, about which you'll hear more shortly. Ellen generously responded with a sizable gift we're using to immediately address the problem, even as we explore longer-term options for funding in this neglected area. Thank you, Ellen. I'd now like to ask the members of our staff who are here tonight to please stand to be recognized. This is a great team. Everybody. Thanks to you all. And special thanks to Lauren Childers, Dana Thomas, and Monica Galloway for the event preparation and the attention to all the detail that helps make tonight a success. Next, would the members of our terrific board of directors who are present tonight please stand and be recognized for their dedication to the center's work. Thank you. This board means we are consistently fighting above our weight every time we go to bat on anything for anybody. So we are so grateful to each of you board members for what you do. Now, let's hear a little more about how Mississippi advances racial and economic justice from three leaders of our work: Linda Rigsby, followed by Amelia McGowan, and ending with Robert McDuff. Linda?
My name is Linda Dixon Rigsby, and I'm the Health Law Director at the Mississippi Center for Justice. Currently, more than 9,000 Mississippians are living with HIV. Unfortunately, stigma and discrimination continue to chronically harm this population of Mississippians. The negative attitudes and beliefs about people living with HIV come in many forms. We have seen it intricately woven into legislation, criminalizing behaviors that would otherwise not be punishable. We have seen it manifest in families as individuals demand loved ones eat from disposable dinnerware. We have seen it in tears as clients describe the crippling role stigma plays in their daily lives. Stigma discourages testing. Stigma creates barriers. Stigma fuels discrimination. Stigma avoids truth and promotes myths that aim to unravel and destroy the daily progress we strive to make. Mississippi has some of the highest rates of HIV infection in the country, ranking 8th in the nation. The city of Jackson, our capital city, has the 6th highest rate of infection in the country. In Mississippi, where African Americans account for 37% of the population, They account for 80% of new HIV diagnoses, bearing a disproportionate burden of the disease. Many of the individuals we assist have experienced various forms of discrimination in the workplace, housing situations, and violations of their privacy. Let me share with you the story of a client who came to us with an employment issue. This client was on a managerial track and was quickly climbing in his career with an industrial company. However, things changed fast when his employer learned of his HIV status. His colleagues began to act differently around him. He felt the stares from customers as word spread. His hours at work were significantly reduced. This is where the Mississippi Center for Justice intervened. We advised the client of his legal rights and assisted with filing a complaint to the EEOC. The conversation surrounding HIV needs to be normalized. The more we engage our communities on the truths surrounding HIV, the less power stigma will have in suffocating the voices, hopes, and dreams of countless Mississippians. We approach our work by providing direct legal services to people living with HIV, advocacy and policy reform, education, and outreach. We work on a state, regional, and national level. We believe this multi-level approach is ideal to engaging diverse communities for our desired outcome of reducing HIV-related stigma and discrimination. On another issue, in addition to refusing to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, Mississippi requested federal approval to require personal caretakers on Medicaid to work 20 hours per week or be terminated. This requirement would amount to a catch-22, since working 20 hours at minimum wage would put someone over the income eligibility threshold. Other states who tried this same tactic have met stiff challenges in court, and we stand ready to do the same if necessary. Today we ask you to continue to support our work through your generous contributions. Spread the word of the meaningful work we are doing in Mississippi to bring about impactful and positive change. It is not our goal to be the best kept secret in Mississippi. Instead, it is our goal to be the best at what we do, and our best includes you. Lend your voice, time, talent, and/or resources to assist us in our efforts. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amelia McGowan, and I'm proud to work as an immigration and fair housing attorney at the Mississippi Center for Justice. Through my position at MCJ, I'm also an adjunct professor of law at Mississippi College School of Law, where I direct the first and only immigration law school clinic in the state of Mississippi. Thank you. Together with my students and my fellow MCJ attorney, Max Myers, we fight for racial and economic justice for those Mississippians who have crossed borders, continents, and oceans to make the hospitality state their home. We fight for hope and security for the orphan child in Jackson, who watched the Ghanaian military publicly execute his father because of the family's political beliefs. We fight for an education for a bright DACA recipient in Potomac, who cannot attend community college with her friends solely because of her immigration status. We fight for a home for the farmer in Forest, who was forced off of his only land in the Guatemalan highlands because he is indigenous. And we fight for the lives of the elderly couple in Hazelhurst who dared to oppose the Venezuelan government and were tied up and beaten for doing so. We fight to continue the legacy of generations of lawyers and advocates who devoted their lives to combating social and political oppression alongside marginalized people in our state. We fight because oppressive immigration policies span far beyond the U.S.-Mexico border and hit us hard at home. These policies embolden local law enforcement agencies in Northeast Mississippi to collaborate with ICE and set up checkpoints during Spanish-language religious services to catch undocumented worshipers heading home. These policies encourage court staff in the Jackson area to call ICE when an undocumented mother fleeing an abusive husband seeks sole custody of her child, resulting in ICE's arresting and detaining her. These policies have resulted in the imprisonment of thousands of asylum seekers from all over the world with no criminal history at the Tallahatchie County Correctional Facility, just miles from the site where Emmett Till was murdered. And these policies have led to the systematic undermining of our nation's immigration courts, the Board of Immigration Appeals, and long-recognized asylum protections enshrined in our law, resulting in the steady removal of Mississippians to places where they face crippling fear, physical harm, torture, and even death. While much of the nation has turned its attention to the U.S.-Mexico border, the MCJ immigration team is mounting a powerful, homegrown defense for immigration in our own state. We provide direct legal representation for Mississippians fighting for their lives who are seeking asylum and other humanitarian immigration protections. We challenge oppressive policies through appeals and amicus briefs. We fight anti-immigrant state and local policies through advocacy and legal action. We provide life-saving Know Your Rights and educational and outreach and legal screenings to Mississippians throughout our state. And we are in the process of creating the first immigration law committee of the Mississippi Bar so that we can promote awareness of immigration issues among the bar throughout our state and increase access to free, quality immigration legal services by training and mentoring new pro bono attorneys. But we need your help. We need your financial support to ensure our immigration team can continue and grow our efforts. We need your logistical and legal support to build our network of pro bono Mississippi attorney defenders. With your support, we will make our state a beacon of freedom, safety, and hospitality for all Mississippians, whether they speak English or Spanish, Vietnamese or Kanhobal, Hindi or Fulani, Arabic or Haitian Creole. Thank you for your support, and with your continued help, we can ensure that Mississippians, immigrants, and refugees in Mississippi do not have to confront this daunting and oppressive system alone. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rob McDuff. I was fortunate to be among a group of Mississippi lawyers and lawyers with Mississippi roots who founded the Mississippi Center for Justice in 2003. One of those was Martha Bergmark. Martha Bergmark, who became the first president of MCJ, and I served as vice chair of the board for many years. 2 years ago, coincidentally not long after Donald Trump began his term of office as president, the Mississippi Center for Justice and I launched the George Riley Impact Litigation Project, which was the result of the successful effort by our current president, Riley Morse, to raise the money for the project from Apple and the Emerson Collective in honor of the late George Riley, a lawyer with O'Melveny and Myers, who served for many years and represented for many years Apple, and who was a member of MCJ's board, having been exposed to the center as a result of his extensive pro bono work with the center on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Now, as we enter the third year of this project, we are heavily, although not exclusively, focused on voting rights, including 2 challenges to provisions of Mississippi's Jim Crow Constitution of 1890. The first of these is a challenge to the felon disfranchisement provision of that Constitution, which bars people from voting who have been convicted of a list of crimes that the framers at the time deemed to be black crimes. The second is a suit that we filed just last week along with the Perkins Coie law firm, supported by the National Redistricting Foundation, that challenges Mississippi's sort of quasi-electoral college. In 1890, the majority of the population in Mississippi was African American. And as a hedge against the possibility that African American voters would elect an African American candidate as governor or to another statewide elected office, which had actually happened a couple of times during Reconstruction, not for governor, but for lieutenant governor in a lesser statewide office, the framers of the Constitution provided that unless a candidate for statewide office receives a majority of the popular vote, a plurality is not sufficient, and is the top vote getter in a majority of the House of Representative districts in the state, the election will be decided by the Mississippi House of Representatives itself, which at the time and today is still heavily white, majority white. It is presently heavily Republican. And under these circumstances, we could well see ourselves in a situation in Mississippi where the heavily Republican House of Representatives could choose who is the next governor, or choose the winners of lower statewide offices, and steal the election from a candidate, even if that candidate is the candidate of choice of a majority of the African American voters, and even if that candidate receives the most votes statewide. So that may sound familiar to some of you. And so we are challenging that. We also next week will be arguing in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, defending an injunction by Federal District Judge Carlton Reeves in a case we brought along with the Lawyers Committee, with the Waters Krause firm from Dallas, with Mississippi Civil Rights Attorney Ellis Turnage, striking down the racially discriminatory district lines of State Senate District 22 in the Mississippi Delta. And we are in the midst of creating the database of redistricting plans of county governing boards and city councils in Mississippi's larger cities, so that when the post-2020 redistrictings occur, and in honor of the notion that even if not all politics is local, much important politics occurs at the local level, we want to be in a position to monitor those redistrictings so that we can help local groups prevent any backsliding, and where there is backsliding and where it can be challenged in court, we want to have lawyers in place to bring those challenges and to prevent that backsliding. Now, we are, in addition to our voting rights work, we are involved in a challenge with the Southern Poverty Law Center against racial profiling of Hispanic motorists by local law enforcement along Mississippi's notorious I-10 corridor by the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We are about to finalize a settlement in a case we brought with Lambda Legal against the South Mississippi Funeral Home, which failed to properly honor a contract to bury a man once they discovered that his husband was a man, that his spouse was also a man. We filed in the last year and promptly settled 2 cases to vindicate the right of prisoners to read books. The first against a Mississippi prison that prohibited a free book distributor from mailing books to prisoners unless they were religious books. And then another suit against a local county jail which prohibited prisoners from reading anything but the Bible. So I mean, what else do you need to survive prison, right? We are engaged with a frequent adversary, the Attorney General of Mississippi. We have together launched a consumer fraud lawsuit against a major student loan servicing contractor, and we are working with our friends at the Center for Reproductive Rights and the Paul Weiss law firm, representing Mississippi's last abortion clinic, which we are simultaneously engaged in the Fifth Circuit, where we are defending the decision of Judge Reeves striking down Mississippi's law prohibiting abortions after 15 weeks, and in the district court, where we litigated and won an injunction from Judge Reeves 11 days ago, striking down the law passed 1 year later, the so-called fetal heartbeat bill, which effectively prohibits abortions after 6 weeks of viability. As Judge Reeves said at the beginning of his last opinion, here we go again. Mississippi has once again passed a law prohibiting abortions prior to viability. So we are engaged in litigation that breaks new ground. We are engaged in fighting battles that 3 years ago we did not think we would need to ever fight again. But that is what the times demand. We are glad we are able to be there to help fight these battles, and we appreciate all of the support you've given to this wonderful organization.
Good evening. Please join me in one more round of applause for Linda and Amelia and Rob, representing an amazing staff. Thank you for all you do. You make me, a part-time Mississippian, feel better about what goes on in my state. At the Mississippi Center for Justice, we have a big vision. Mississippi was ground zero for America's original sin of slavery. We are also home to a heroic but unfinished struggle for civil rights. And in the 21st century, we aspire to make Mississippi the social justice state. Yes. So, need I say more about why we need your help? We thank you for all that you have done to make this event such a success, but we would be remiss not to give you just one more chance. To do that this evening. So everybody in the room has one of these, yes? So how often do you get to see a speaker who asks you to get it out of your pocket and please, work with it right now? So please do that. This is your text to give moment if you're so inspired, and we hope that you will be. It's really easy. It's dangerously easy, as David Stern taught me at an Equal Justice Works dinner. All you have to do is go to your messages, put in the :, line, put this number, 601-258-9640, and then, this is not text sensitive, in the message box, MCJ space DC. You'll immediately get a message back asking you the amount that you'd like to donate and taking the information. So I hope you'll take a last occasion this evening to do that, to make this already is our peak performance as a DC reception. So thank you. Let's give a big thank you to yourselves for doing that, and ask you to do it one more time. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Don Verrilli, proud member of the board of the Mississippi Center for Justice, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to have the privilege of introducing tonight's Mississippi on the Potomac honoree, Walter Dellinger. Looking out, I see many of you who know and love Walter, and I know you're here to honor him and celebrate him, and we thank you for being here, and we thank you for supporting the center. Now, I want to talk about what's really important about Walter Dellinger. But before I do that, I've got to get a few basic facts out on the table. So let me go through the basic facts about Walter Dellinger. Basic fact number one, Walter is one of the great public servants of our era. He served as Solicitor General, 1996-97 term of the Supreme Court, argued 9 cases that term, a feat I tried to duplicate one year, and it damn near killed me. For before that, he served for 3 years as Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel at DOJ, and his opinions from that time in the office as the lead counselor for the President and the executive branch are still touchstones for resolving the hardest constitutional questions that the executive branch confronts. May not be exactly true now, but it will be once again, I'm sure. Basic fact number 2, Walter is one of the great Supreme Court advocates of our era. He's argued dozens of cases in the court. He's won landmark victories. And the 2 cases he's most justifiably proud of, which tells you something about Walter, are Brown against Legal Foundation of Washington, which established the constitutionality of using lawyer trust funds to finance legal services, and Jackson v. Birmingham, which recognized the rights of coaches and teachers to sue for retaliation under Title IX when they were fired for opposing unequal treatment for women's sports teams. Basic fact number 3, Walter is one of the great private practitioners of our era. After leaving the government, he founded an appellate practice at O'Melveny that very quickly became one of the nation's best and nurtured the careers of many of the legal superstars of the next generation. Next basic fact about Walter, he's one of the great constitutional scholars of our era. He's the Douglas B. Maggs Professor of Law Emeritus at Duke Law School. Generations of students have benefited from her superb teaching, and over his career, he's produced an enormous body of powerful constitutional scholarship. And as Walter may tell you, after graduating from Yale Law School, he started his career teaching law, constitutional law, at the University of Mississippi Law School. Next basic fact about Walter, he's one of the great public intellectuals of our era. Whenever this country is wrestling with a legal issue of great importance, Walter's honest and wise and progressive voice will be enriching the public discourse, whether it's on Twitter, or the op-ed pages of the Times or the Post, MSNBC, and it's as true now with the question of impeachment looming before us as it was in the middle of the great debates over civil rights and reproductive freedoms decades ago. And most important basic fact about Walter, he's one of the great champions of justice of our era. From his very first days in Mississippi to today, he's been fighting for justice, access to justice for the poor, reproductive freedom, voting rights, and so much more. So, you take a step back and think about that. That's like half a dozen lifetimes worth of amazing achievement in one person. And that's plenty to justify honoring Walter tonight. But those are just the things Walter has done. Those of us who know him know that what is best about Walter by far is not what he has done, but the person he is. And those of us who have been blessed to work with Walter know that there is no better or wiser colleague. When I needed guidance as SG, Walter was always the best source of that guidance. I turned to him for advice on every important case, healthcare, marriage equality, reproductive freedom, you name it, everything of consequence. And Walter always put everything aside to help me, and his advice was always unbelievably helpful. Those of us who know Walter also know that there is no better mentor than Walter. His practice at O'Melveny, as I said, it was a launching pad for an incredible generation of young lawyers. Judge Srinivasan, Judge Harris of the Fourth Circuit, Irv Gornstein, who runs the Georgetown Supreme Court Advocacy Program, John Hacker, who runs Melveny's appellate group, Jeremy Maltby, who's now the managing partner of O'Melveny here in D.C., and so many more, all came to fruition under Walter's guidance, which was an amazing thing. And those of us who have been blessed with his friendship know that there is no truer or more steadfast friend than Walter. For me, that really came home when the slings and arrows were flying after the healthcare arguments in 2012. Walter was right there by my side. And it was true not just in private, but in public. And it was not true just after the decision came down, but before. So Walter, it has been one of the great blessings of my life to know you, have you as a friend. and we at the Mississippi Center for Justice salute you as a great public servant, a superb Supreme Court advocate, an unmatched private practitioner, a deep constitutional scholar, an engaged public intellectual, a champion of justice, and a cherished colleague, mentor, and friend. Thank you for letting us honor you tonight.
So in June of 1966, Ann and I left New Haven in a Volkswagen Beetle and headed south, way south, to Mississippi. I was going to teach political and civil rights and constitutional law to one of the beginning integrated classes at the University of Mississippi, and Ann taught Survey of English Literature. She had most of the Sugar Bowl team in her class, and her generosity enabled several of the key performers to be on the field that day. Riley Morse's uncle, cousin in Mississippi, nobody counts, was the dean, often rumored to be a communist, but that term was used loosely in those days, who recruited a group of us from Yale Law School to come down there. I've wondered in thinking about this evening what led me to Oxford, Mississippi. There are many sources. The guidance of my older sister, whose devotion to equal justice taught me a lot. After my father passed away when I was 11 and my little sister was 5, Barbara was our moral guidance. I do remember reading James Baldwin. Don, you sent me a nice note after I wrote the piece the day the Baldwin documentary was up for an Academy Award. And what really was striking to me was I was reading Baldwin while working construction on a segregated work site in Charlotte, North Carolina. I read a passage where Baldwin had made his first trip south. Here's a gay black intellectual and writer from Harlem and Paris. He makes his first trip to the South. When the ministers in Charlotte put him on the plane, they say to head into the deep South. They say, "You've seen Charlotte, but Charlotte isn't really the South." And I was very proud for a moment until I turned the page and Baldwin's next sentence was, "Charlotte, by God, was Southern enough for me." But Mississippi beckoned me in part because of what Josh Morse wanted to do as dean, to create an African-American bar in the state of Mississippi, and to make the law school, as it was for a brief shining moment, a site of advocacy for social justice. It was also Baldwin saying that, white people, you need to work on white people. That's where our problem is. The essays I read by Baldwin were reflected in what Chris Rock was later to say. There's no such thing as a race relations problem. We have a problem that white people are crazy. And now they're a little less crazy. And that's progress. But that's where, so I thought that if I went down, I was one of the 2 Southerners in the group that Josh Morse recruited. I think I had the deeper Southern accent at that moment, so I was the one that had to teach political and civil rights. We had some great students. Reuben Anderson went on to a distinguished judicial career in Mississippi. I was told quietly by one of my students that another student in the class was secretly taping my lectures and sending the cassette every night to the White Citizens Council in Jackson, Mississippi. And so for the next class, I got to a point where I said, now, for those of you who are listening down in Jackson, this next point, pay attention, this next point is really important. So I want you to pay close attention. I'll repeat it slowly. Okay? You know, I thought if we were to be one nation, Mississippi had to be a part of that. There was what makes me especially moved tonight is I know our relationship through George Riley, my deceased O'Melveny partner, has supported the Mississippi Center, which makes this a special honor. But also one of my colleagues there was Mike Trister. Mike had the bestest, goodest connection to social justice of any person I have ever known. And what Mike did, after I left to go clerk for Hugo Black, Mike and George Strickler started the North Mississippi Rural Legal Services Project. His courage and the depth of his integrity have always been a beacon for me. Well, I'll close with this. The day I was born, May 15th, 1941, Joe DiMaggio, who had gone hitless the day before, got a single in the second inning in an otherwise meaningless game, except for the fact that he got a hit the next day, and the next day, and day after day throughout the summer of 1941, gripping the whole nation with the greatest streak in the history of all of sports. And when I saw that it began the day I was born, the very day, May 15th, 1941, I reflected back on the fact that on the day I was born and DiMaggio started his streak, no person of color was allowed to play any major league sport. I think nearly a third of Americans said they would support some legal restrictions on Jews. Gay men and women were subject to arrest, prosecution, imprisonment. In that time, though I was clearly by far the poorest kid in my high school class, because I was white, I had access to the public life of the community. I went to the same public schools as the richest kids in town, and the public librarian helped me find the books I needed to read. I realized that was the special quality of being white, but it was also quality of the openness that we've lost. We've lost the openness that allows people to move throughout our culture. And I worry that a child growing up today would not have the same wonderful opportunities that I had, including the wonderful opportunity to be with you all tonight, and to thank you very much for this great honor. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Britton, and I'm going to pay tribute to the late Mike Trister. Mike Trister was my angel, not once but twice. At the beginning of my legal career in the summer of 1969, in one instance, he saved me from the draft or military conscription with the possibility of deployment to Vietnam for war that I vehemently opposed. And in the other instance, saved me from facing a felony crime conviction with a possible sentence to prison and disbarment from the practice of law. As my educational deferments from the draft were about to expire upon graduation from law school, I developed a cockamamie plan with a unique request for an occupational deferment. I desperately needed a job in Mississippi or another southern state. My job search looked grim after I'd exhausted all options when Mike, the director of the North Mississippi Rural Legal Services Program in Oxford, appeared as an angel on my recruitment visit, and he offered me a staff attorney position Bingo! I completed the last element of my deferment. With odds for success about as good as hitting the lotto, though. I requested the type of deferment normally given to such occupations as a police officer, firefighter, or school teacher that, in the words of the selective service system, serve the nation's health, safety, or interests. I attached a letter from Mike with the job description on my occupation as a poverty lawyer to help the poor and black people in Mississippi gain access to justice. I'm still partially in shock nearly 50 years later that the board granted my request. Mike, you were my angel that substantiated the grounds for the deferment. Off I went to Mississippi as a black Yank from northern Connecticut, like you, Walter. Next, with rapid-fire summaries, now and in real life then, from December 1969 to April 1970, I did the following with Mike covering my back. Filed my first lawsuit in federal court, a first desegregation case in Oxford that resulted in a favorable order to desegregate the public schools. Secured the release of 4 Ole Miss African American students, most of whom alleged the police wrongfully and collectively arrested for the acts of a few fellow students who peacefully disrupted a performance at the campus theater in protest to racism on campus. And finally, I luckily scored one of those lawyer Perry Mason television show scenes where the witness makes a major concession on the witness stand, and that ends the case. In my cross-examination of a telephone company expert, the witness testified that he traced the number of a caller that made obscene phone calls to a victim. The suspect was the minor client that I represented in the juvenile delinquency hearing. When I asked the witness for the telephone company if he knew the telephone number that was traced to this client that I represented was a party line with small children, he answered no. Case closed. The prosecution could not reasonably identify the caller of a multi-party line. How many of you remember that old phone system with no dialer? The caller picks up the phone and asks the operator to connect to a number. I guess that powerful interest in the city and county had enough of me. The sheriff soon called me to come to the jail on a pretext that a person detained requested my legal services. Instead, the sheriff arrested me on a felony charge of practicing law without a license. Once again, Mike appeared like a golden angel from heaven with the deputy director, Ken Spriggs, to not only bail me out of jail, but win a court order from a federal judge that enjoined the state prosecution against me on the grounds the charges were based upon bad faith and retaliation against my client, and for pursuing the rule of law and access to justice to resolve disputes. The judge in the juvenile case had granted me permission on the record to represent the minor based upon the common practice that I was licensed in another state, appeared in court with a Mississippi lawyer, and worked full-time for a nonprofit legal organization that represented poor people without a fee. Mike kept the sharps, who could smell the blood of conviction, away for over a year until I passed the Mississippi bar and became a licensed lawyer in the state. Both parties agreed to let bygones be bygones, and we mutually dismissed the lawsuits. Mike Trister saved my legal career. I am here tonight, after nearly 50 years of law teaching and civil rights practice, to thank you, Mike, my guardian angel, in the old Southern vernacular. Much obliged, much obliged, much obliged. Now, let me share a tribute from two other friends of Mike's, delivered at MCJ's Jackson event only a day before he passed away. honored to present this evening's Special Recognition Award posthumously to Michael Trister. Accepting this award is Mike Trister's wife, Nancy Duff Campbell.
This has been perhaps a record, not only in terms of money raised, but in delivering the program in an economical amount of time. And I think that deserves a round of applause all by itself. We want to thank you all for joining us. We want to wish you safe travels home. Please be safe getting home, because we treasure each and every one of you. And we hope to see you again next year for another terrific program. Thank you so much.